Friends, if you want to watch the super hit movie The Conjuring, Last Rites in English, then you must like this video. If you are visiting our channel for the first time, do not forget to subscribe because today we are going to dive into one of the most anticipated entries in modern horror cinema. The movie we are going to talk about is called The Conjuring, Last Rites, and in this discussion we will explore every detail you need to know. From what the movie is about, where you can watch it, the production details, behind-the-scenes facts, and even a short overview of the plot, this video will serve as a complete guide for anyone curious about this film. By the end, you will know not just the story but also how the cast and crew work together to bring this terrifying experience to the screen. The Conjuring, Last Rites continues the chilling saga that audiences have followed for more than a decade. The series began with James Wan's groundbreaking first film and grew into one of the most successful horror franchises in history. This installment, Last Rites, has been described as a fitting conclusion to the main Warren storyline while also leaving doors open for spin-offs and related films. Fans of Ed and Lorraine Warren will once again get to see their favorite paranormal investigators face one of the most terrifying cases of their careers. When it comes to technical departments, the movie benefits from a strong combination of direction, cinematography, sound design, and special effects. Horror cinema relies heavily on atmosphere, and the filmmakers here ensure that every frame is drenched in suspense. The cinematography captures shadowy corners, dim candlelight, and sudden bursts of movement to keep audiences on edge. Sound design is equally important, with carefully placed silences, whispers, and sharp bursts of music heightening the scares. From pre-production planning to final editing, the technical crew made sure the movie delivers the kind of horror experience fans expect from a Conjuring film. The pre-production stage included detailed research into the Warrens' case files, location scouting, and script polishing to ensure the narrative stayed grounded while still allowing for supernatural elements. Filming itself took place across atmospheric locations that add authenticity to the story. Post-production involved extensive editing, digital effects, and color grading to amplify the eerie mood. Each stage contributed to the film's ability to keep viewers locked in suspense. On the financial side, the budget of The Conjuring, Last Rites was carefully managed to balance high-quality production values with the kind of financial responsibility Warner Bros. Has maintained for this franchise. Horror movies often achieve impressive returns because of their lower budgets compared to action or fantasy films, and this installment was no different. At the box office, the movie attracted a massive audience both domestically and internationally, proving once again that fans remain loyal to the Conjuring brand. Now let us briefly touch on the story. Without revealing too many spoilers, the film follows Ed and Lorraine Warren as they face perhaps their most personal and dangerous case. This story blends elements of faith, possession, and family with the tension of an escalating supernatural threat. The plot maintains the signature Conjuring structure of slow-build suspense leading to explosive climaxes, ensuring viewers are gripped from start to finish. In terms of performances, Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga once again return as Ed and Lorraine, delivering strong and heartfelt portrayals. Their chemistry as a couple anchors the movie, making the emotional moments as powerful as the terrifying ones. Supporting cast members bring depth and authenticity to their roles, and each actor adds to the chilling atmosphere. Some standout moments include Lorraine's visions, Ed's battle with personal struggles, and the overall interplay between faith and fear that has defined this series. What makes The Conjuring, Last Rites unique is not only its scares but also its emotional depth. The movie is not just about ghosts and demons. It is about the resilience of a couple who continue to risk everything for others. This human core is what separates the Conjuring films from many other horror franchises. In review, The Conjuring, Last Rites successfully combines technical brilliance, heartfelt performances, and a gripping story into a film that satisfies both longtime fans and newcomers. It brings together the best elements of horror filmmaking while staying true to the central theme of the Warren legacy. Whether you are watching for the supernatural scares, the behind-the-scenes craftsmanship, or the story of Ed and Lorraine's courage, this movie has something to offer. So friends, stay tuned until the end of this video because we will continue breaking down every aspect of The Conjuring, Last Rites, from how it was made to why it has become such an important chapter in modern horror cinema. This is your complete introduction to the movie, its production, its stars, and its story. Make sure to watch till the end to get everything you need to know about The Conjuring, Last Rites. The Conjuring, Last Rites is a 2025 supernatural horror film that serves as the culminating chapter in the long-running Warren saga. Directed by Michael Chavez and produced by James Wan and Peter Safran, The movie brings closure to Ed and Lorraine Warren's cinematic journey while tying together story threads that have been building since the very first film. The story opens with a chilling prologue set in 1964. Lorraine Warren, played by Vera Farmiga, is drawn into a disturbing vision involving an antique mirror. This vision nearly costs her unborn child and sets the stage for the danger that will follow decades later. The prologue not only introduces the sinister mirror but also establishes the emotional weight that Lorraine carries throughout the film. The main narrative shifts 22 years later to the Smurl family, who move into a modest Pennsylvania home. At first everything seems ordinary, but soon the family begins experiencing unsettling phenomena. Voices whisper in the night, cold drafts sweep through the rooms, and objects move on their own. At the center of it all is a large mirror the Smurls have unknowingly brought into their home. What begins as small disturbances escalates quickly into violent assaults. One of the daughters collapses and is found with shards of glass embedded in her skin, as though the mirror itself has attacked her. The family grows increasingly desperate as their home becomes a battleground of fear. The haunting draws the attention of Judy Warren, portrayed by Mia Tomlinson, who has inherited her mother's psychic gifts. Judy begins receiving terrifying visions connected to the mirror and to the cursed Annabelle doll, which still haunts her subconscious. Her visions reveal a powerful entity manipulating the family through reflections and memories. This forces Ed Warren, played by Patrick Wilson, and Lorraine to come out of retirement and investigate one final time. They are joined by Tony Spera, played by Ben Hardy, who works alongside the Warrens to uncover the source of the evil. As the investigation deepens, the malevolent force grows bolder. The mirror serves as both a gateway and a weapon, allowing the demon to torment the family relentlessly. Lorraine experiences terrifying visions of death and decay, while Ed struggles with his own weakening health. Judy, despite her youth, becomes central to the battle as her psychic link makes her both a target and a weapon against the entity. The family's faith and unity are pushed to the breaking point as the house descends into chaos. Several sequences highlight the escalating terror. At one point, the Smurl home fills with deafening noises and violent shaking as if the entire structure is being torn apart. In another, the mirror is taken away only to mysteriously reappear in the house, more threatening than ever. Each attempt to destroy it fails, intensifying the belief that the demon cannot be defeated by ordinary means. The climax unfolds during a desperate exorcism in which Lorraine channels her psychic abilities to confront the demon directly. Judy joins her, and together they fight to sever the mirror's hold. The struggle takes a heavy toll, but with Ed's strength and Tony Spera's support, the mirror is finally shattered in a blinding moment of light and terror. The demon's scream echoes as it is cast out, leaving the family shaken but alive. In the aftermath, the story closes with a softer, more emotional note. The film ends at Judy Warren's wedding, symbolizing hope, continuity, and the resilience of the Warren family despite the horrors they have faced. This epilogue serves as a touching farewell to Ed and Lorraine, acknowledging their sacrifices while allowing Judy and Tony to carry forward their legacy. The supporting cast adds depth to the story. Rebecca Calder and Elliot Cowan portray members of the Smurl family, each delivering emotionally charged performances that reflect the terror and hopelessness of living under constant supernatural assault. Their portrayals ground the film in relatable human emotion, which contrasts sharply with the supernatural spectacle. The Conjuring Last Rites blends classic horror tropes with the emotional weight of family drama. The screenplay by Ian Goldberg, Richard Naying, and David Leslie Johnson McGoldrick draws from real-life Warren case files while amplifying the suspense with creative supernatural sequences. The haunting imagery, atmospheric cinematography by Eli Bourne, and unsettling score by Benjamin Wallfish elevate the film's tension. Ultimately, the film is both a traditional Conjuring case file and a heartfelt farewell to its central characters. It explores themes of faith, sacrifice, and the unbreakable bonds of family while delivering the scares and tension that fans expect. The Conjuring Last Rites succeeds as a satisfying conclusion to one of the most successful horror franchises of all time, leaving audiences with both fear and closure. The Conjuring Last Rites begins with an unsettling prologue set in 1964. The very first image is Lorraine Warren standing in front of an antique mirror, her reflection flickering unnaturally as though it were alive. The setup is immediate, a demonic force is present, and Lorraine's psychic abilities connect her to it in a way that feels both terrifying and intimate. This opening not only provides a chilling hook but also establishes the emotional stakes. Lorraine nearly loses her unborn child as a result of this encounter, an event that will shape the family's destiny. The inciting incident arrives decades later in the mid-1980s, when the Smurl family moves into their new Pennsylvania home. What seems like a hopeful beginning for them quickly turns sinister as they notice odd disturbances, whispers in the night, cold drafts, and a mirror in the house that seems to watch them. This is the spark that reactivates the narrative thread from the prologue and pulls the Warrens back into the world of paranormal investigation, even though Ed is physically struggling and Lorraine has promised herself she would never risk her family again. The rising action builds steadily as the haunting intensifies. The mirror becomes the central object of dread, not just reflecting but influencing reality. Small incidents, flickering lights, voices calling out children's names, spiral into violent attacks. A daughter collapses during dinner, covered in glass shards as if the mirror itself has shattered inside her body. The family grows desperate, and news spreads, turning their private torment into a public spectacle. At the same time, Judy Warren begins to experience visions linked to the haunting. Her psychic inheritance, long kept under control, now pulls her into the case against her will. This narrative choice not only raises the stakes for the Warrens but shifts focus onto the next generation, showing how trauma and duty are passed down. At the midpoint, the film pivots dramatically. During an attempted blessing of the house, the mirror is removed and taken far away, only for it to mysteriously reappear in the Smurl home the next morning. This turning point reinforces that the entity is not tied to a physical object alone but to the family's memories and to Lorraine herself. It is here that the story introduces its biggest twist. The demon has been manipulating events since Lorraine's first encounter in 1964, feeding on her visions and binding itself to the Warren bloodline. This revelation reframes earlier scenes and makes clear that Judy is not just a witness but a target. The narrative escalates toward its climax through a series of set pieces that combine horror spectacle with emotional resonance. Ed nearly suffers a fatal heart attack while confronting the entity, a moment that crystallizes his vulnerability and Lorraine's fear of losing him. Judy steps into the forefront, deciding to face the demon directly despite her parents' attempts to protect her. This choice is not only a plot necessity but an emotional peak, as Judy transforms from the sheltered daughter to the inheritor of her family's mission. The finale unfolds in the Smurl home during a storm-lashed night. Lorraine channels her psychic power into the mirror, Judy stands beside her amplifying the connection, and Ed recites prayers despite his weakening condition. The demon lashes out with illusions and violent physical manifestations, nearly breaking them apart. But in a decisive beat, Judy manages to fracture the mirror from within the vision, an act of courage that shatters the entity's control. The mirror explodes in the real world, ending the haunting in a burst of sound and silence. The way this scene is staged highlights not only the victory over the supernatural but the strength of family unity against darkness. The resolution shifts to Judy's wedding day. This closing beat offers emotional catharsis, showing the Warrens at peace and providing the audience with closure after years of watching them endure relentless torment. Yet the narrative leaves a subtle gap, a faint echo of the demon's presence during Judy's vows, suggesting that evil can never be fully erased. This deliberate ambiguity ensures that while the Warrens chapter feels complete, the larger universe of The Conjuring remains open for interpretation. The narrative structure of The Conjuring Last Rites is linear, moving cleanly from past to present with only the opening flashback setting up the main timeline. This choice keeps the film accessible while allowing for powerful revelations at key turning points. The emotional peaks, Lorraine's first vision, the reappearance of the mirror, Ed's collapse, Judy's choice, and the destruction of the mirror, are carefully spaced to maintain suspense and to mirror the rhythm of dread and release. Every scene serves not just to advance the plot, but to deepen our understanding of the characters and the cost of their fight against evil. By the end, the story has delivered both the haunting spectacle expected from a Conjuring film and the intimate human drama that has always set the series apart. The narrative choices reinforce themes of faith, sacrifice, legacy, and the unshakable bonds of family, making The Conjuring Last Rites a fitting conclusion to the Warrens' cinematic journey. The characters in The Conjuring Last Rites are not just pieces moving through a haunted house, they are people shaped by years of fear, faith, and sacrifice. Their arcs give the film its emotional weight and elevate the story beyond simple scares. Lorraine Warren, played by Vera Farmiga, enters the film as a woman haunted by her past visions and by the price her family has paid for her gift. In the opening prologue, we see her shaken and terrified, almost losing her child to the force that emerges through the antique mirror. This moment defines her starting point. She is both powerful and fragile, deeply afraid of what her psychic abilities might cost her loved ones. Throughout the film, Lorraine's want is clear. She wants peace and safety for her family, but what stands in her way is the inescapable bond between her and the supernatural. Subtle beats reveal her conflict, such as her hesitation before touching the mirror or her trembling hand when Judy speaks of her visions. By the end, Lorraine embraces her role not as a victim of her gift but as its master. In the climax, she chooses to channel her abilities directly into the mirror, showing growth from fear to acceptance. Her arc is one of reluctant acceptance turned into strength. Ed Warren, played by Patrick Wilson, begins as a man worn down physically and spiritually. His health is fragile, and he wants nothing more than to retire peacefully with his wife. Yet Ed's defining trait is his unwavering loyalty to Lorraine and his sense of duty to protect families under attack. His obstacle is both external, the demon that threatens the Smurls, and internal, his weakening body. In key scenes we see him hide his labored breathing, and at one point he collapses after confronting the entity, signaling how close he is to his breaking point. What makes his arc powerful is that he learns to lean on others. When Judy steps forward to take on the fight, Ed lets go of his fear of losing control and allows the next generation to share the burden. His growth lies in acceptance of legacy, shifting from protector to mentor. Judy Warren, portrayed by Mia Tomlinson, is the character with the clearest transformation. At the beginning she is reluctant, her psychic visions more of a curse than a gift. She wants a normal life and resents the shadows cast by her parents' work. Her obstacle is the inevitability of her inheritance. Her psychic connection makes her a target whether she wants it or not. Her subtle beats are some of the strongest in the film, an offhand line about wishing she could be normal, a trembling hand when she describes her dreams, and a quiet glance at Annabelle that hints at her inner fears. Judy's turning point comes when the mirror reappears, and she realizes that her visions can also be a weapon. In the climax she chooses to stand beside Lorraine, amplifying the psychic energy that destroys the demon. This choice signals her acceptance of who she is, completing her arc from reluctant daughter to heir of the Warren legacy. Tony Spera, played by Ben Hardy, functions as both support and contrast. He begins skeptical of Judy's involvement, wanting to shield her from danger. His role is grounded in pragmatism, handling logistics, safeguarding objects, and trying to keep the family stable. His subtle growth comes from acknowledging Judy's strength. A key gesture occurs when he hands her a rosary before the climax, a quiet symbol of trust. While his arc is smaller than the Warrens, it adds depth to Judy's story and prevents him from being window dressing. The Smurl family, portrayed by Rebecca Calder, Elliot Cowan, and others, serve as the human heart of the haunting. They begin as hopeful homeowners wanting stability but are broken down by relentless attacks. Their want is simple, to live without fear, but the mirror strips them of peace. While their individual arcs are not as fleshed out as the Warrens, their suffering is essential. A particularly emotional beat comes when the mother whispers that she feels like her home hates her, a line that reveals the psychological toll of the haunting. Their role is meaningful because they ground the supernatural threat in everyday life. The antagonist, the demon tied to the mirror, represents more than just evil. It embodies memory, inheritance, and the idea that trauma can echo across generations. Its tactic of using reflections and illusions shows how it manipulates not only physical reality but inner fears. The mirror's persistence, always returning after destruction, symbolizes how the past cannot be erased but must be confronted. In this way, the antagonist is both literal and metaphorical, forcing each character to face what they most fear. By the end of The Conjuring, Last Rites, every central character has changed. Lorraine grows from fear into acceptance of her gift, Ed evolves from protector into someone willing to let go, Judy transforms into the true heir of her family's mission, and Tony learns to trust her strength. Even the Smurls, though scarred, find a form of release. The antagonist may be defeated, but its legacy reshapes everyone involved. These arcs make the film not only a story of horror but also a study of resilience, inheritance, and the strength that emerges from unity. Performances play a central role in making The Conjuring Last Rites more than just another horror film. What could have been a series of scares becomes an emotionally resonant story because of how the actors bring depth, timing, and subtlety to their roles. Some disappear so fully into their characters that the boundary between actor and role fades, while others bring energy or restraint in ways that shape the film's emotional rhythm. Vera Farmiga once again anchors the story as Lorraine Warren. Farmiga has built this character over multiple films, and here she delivers her most layered work yet. She captures the weight of decades of visions and battles through physical choices, the way she pauses before touching the mirror, the tremor in her voice when she warns Judy about visions, and the haunted look in her eyes during moments of silence. A standout moment is her monologue midway through the film where she confesses to Ed that she has felt the demon since 1964. The lines themselves are simple, but her delivery makes them heartbreaking. Her performance is one of restraint, and it is precisely this restraint that makes her moments of terror feel real. Patrick Wilson as Ed Warren provides the counterbalance. He plays Ed as a man weighed down by failing health yet driven by a need to protect. Wilson uses physicality to underline this fragility. His labored breathing, the way he braces himself on furniture, and the sudden collapse during the mirror confrontation. His chemistry with Farmiga remains the emotional core of the film. Their quiet exchanges, such as when Ed reassures Lorraine before the exorcism, sell their relationship in a way that no dialogue alone could achieve. Wilson's strongest moment comes during the climax, when his voice cracks mid-prayer, showing both weakness and resolve. Mia Tomlinson as Judy Warren emerges as the breakout. She has the most transformative arc, and her performance rises to the challenge. Early on, her reluctance is communicated through subtle gestures, a hesitant glance, a hand clutching her arm when visions overwhelm her. As the story progresses, she grows in presence, her voice steadying and her posture firming. The turning point comes when Judy tells her parents that she is no longer afraid. Her delivery of this line feels both defiant and tender, a performance choice that signals her readiness to inherit the mantle. In the climax, she commands the screen, holding her own against Farmiga and Wilson, and proving that she can carry emotional weight in a franchise defined by its veteran leads. Ben Hardy as Tony Spera gives a quieter performance, but it resonates. He portrays Tony as practical and protective, often acting as the grounding force amid chaos. His timing is understated, choosing silence or a simple nod over unnecessary dialogue. This restraint pays off in a small but powerful scene where he presses a rosary into Judy's hand. It is wordless, but his body language communicates trust and support. Hardy may not command attention in every scene, but his presence strengthens the dynamic and prevents Judy's arc from feeling isolated. Rebecca Calder and Elliot Cowan, playing members of the Smurl family, give performances that ground the supernatural in relatable human suffering. Calder, in particular, has a memorable scene where she whispers that she feels her home hates her. It is delivered with such quiet despair that it lingers long after the moment passes. Cowan brings intensity during the scenes where the family is under attack, embodying the helplessness of a parent unable to shield his children. Though the Smurls are supporting characters, their performances ensure that the stakes feel personal rather than abstract. As for the antagonist, the demon itself is a creation of sound, visual effects, and performance capture. While no single actor embodies it consistently, the physicality of its movement and the way voices are layered make the presence convincing. What sells the demon's menace is not just the visual effects but how the human actors react to it. Farmiga's horrified stillness, Tomlinson's trembling resolve, and Wilson's desperate prayers all amplify the threat. If there is a weakness in the ensemble, it comes from a few secondary supporting roles, neighbors, clergy, and minor investigators, who feel more like placeholders than fully realized characters. Their performances sometimes lack the weight of lived-in reality, pulling the audience slightly out of the story during their brief appearances. However, these moments are fleeting and do not undercut the overall strength of the cast. In the end, the performances in The Conjuring Last Rites elevate the film beyond its script. Farmiga and Wilson provide a seasoned emotional core, Tomlinson steps forward as the next-generation anchor, Hardy reinforces the family dynamic, and Calder ensures the haunting feels painfully human. Together, their timing, chemistry, and physical choices transform written beats into living emotion, giving the film both its terror and its heart. The Conjuring Last Rites is directed by Michael Chavez, and his vision is evident in almost every frame. Having already helmed earlier entries in the franchise, he approaches this installment with a balance of reverence for James Wan's original style and a desire to push the series into a more modern, spectacle-driven space. His choices in tone, pacing, staging, and actor guidance shape how the film feels from its first unsettling image to its final moment of quiet resolution. One of Chavez's strongest decisions is the way he sets tone. The film opens with a prologue that relies on silence, reflection, and slow dread rather than immediate jump scares. This approach primes the audience for a story that will be more about atmosphere and gradual tension than cheap shocks. Throughout the film he alternates between long, lingering takes and sudden abrupt cuts. A good example is the first major mirror scare. The camera holds on Lorraine's reflection a few seconds longer than feels comfortable, lulling the audience into anticipating nothing, before cutting sharply to the moment her reflection moves independently. The contrast between stillness and sudden violence becomes a stylistic signature. Pacing is carefully managed in the first half, with Chavez deliberately stretching out moments of unease to mirror the family's slow realization that they are in danger. This patient build mirrors the structure of the original Conjuring, but with a slightly more polished visual aesthetic. However, the second half of the film accelerates quickly, with a barrage of set pieces and supernatural assaults. While this escalation delivers excitement, some critics may find that the pacing shift sacrifices the creeping dread of earlier sequences. The decision to go big with spectacle in the finale works for some audiences but leaves less room for the more intimate scares that defined earlier films. Chavez's staging of scenes shows a strong grasp of space and geography. The Smurl house becomes a character in itself, with corridors and staircases used to heighten tension. He often employs tracking shots that move through the house in ways that mirror the entity's unseen presence. These long takes give the viewer a sense of being pulled along, trapped in the same maze as the family. Close-ups are used sparingly but effectively. When Lorraine's hand trembles as she touches the mirror, the camera stays tight, forcing the audience to feel her hesitation. This blend of wide atmospheric shots and carefully chosen close-ups defines Chavez's visual style in the film. Guiding actors is another area where his directorial hand is clear. He gives Vera Farmiga space to play Lorraine with restraint, emphasizing quiet pauses and subtle gestures rather than overt dramatics. Patrick Wilson is directed to lean into physical vulnerability, his fragility making his protective instincts more moving. Most notably, Mia Tomlinson's performance as Judy feels shaped by Chavez's focus on generational transition. He frames her with visual cues that parallel her parents, lingering shots on her eyes during visions, deliberate staging that places her beside the mirror where Lorraine once stood, signaling her role as heir to the Warren legacy. These choices underline her arc while guiding the audience's emotional response. Stylistically, Chavez makes confident use of mirrors as a recurring motif. Reflections, distortions, and duplicate images appear in multiple sequences, not just as jump scares but as thematic devices. This creates continuity between the haunting and the character's internal struggles with memory and legacy. His use of sound complements this visual motif. Instead of relying solely on musical stings, he integrates environmental sounds, creaking wood, muffled whispers, distorted echoes, that build tension. This directorial choice roots the horror in the physical space of the house, making the supernatural feel tangible. Not all of Chavez's decisions land equally well. The climax, while ambitious, leans heavily on digital effects. The mirror explosion and the demon's manifestation feel more like action spectacle than gothic horror, and this shift may interrupt the flow for audiences who prefer the franchise's earlier emphasis on subtlety. Additionally, a few secondary characters are staged more as plot devices than fully integrated figures, giving certain scenes a mechanical rather than organic feel. These choices do not ruin the film but slightly weaken the seamless immersion the director otherwise builds. Overall, Chavez's direction makes The Conjuring Last Rites feel both familiar and distinct. His stylistic signatures, lingering shots, abrupt cuts, and thematic use of mirrors shape the emotional ride. His control over pacing and atmosphere in the first half demonstrates confidence, while his decision to embrace spectacle in the finale reflects both ambition and risk. Most importantly, his guidance of performances ensures that the emotional arcs of Lorraine, Ed, and Judy remain the heart of the film. In the end, his vision delivers a conclusion that is both frightening and emotionally resonant, cementing the movie as a defining chapter in the franchise. The cinematography of The Conjuring Last Rites plays a crucial role in shaping the film's identity, ensuring that its scares are not just delivered through writing or sound design but embedded in the very way the camera sees the story. Shot by cinematographer Tristan Nibby, the film builds on the visual grammar established in earlier Conjuring entries while experimenting with new techniques that make this installment feel both classic and modern. Every choice in framing, movement, lighting, and color contributes to how the audience experiences dread, intimacy, and catharsis. One of the most striking aspects of the cinematography is the use of framing to manipulate perspective. Wide framing is employed when the Warrens first arrive at the Smurl home, giving the audience a sense of vulnerability as characters are dwarfed by shadowy spaces. These shots emphasize the house as an entity itself, looming and watching. In contrast, tight framing is reserved for moments of personal terror, Lorraine's face reflected in a mirror, Judy's trembling hand, Ed's gasping breaths, drawing us into the characters' emotional states. This careful alternation between wide and tight shots underscores the tension between external threat and internal struggle. Camera movement is another standout element. Nibby often uses slow tracking shots that glide through corridors, suggesting the unseen presence of the entity following or leading the characters. These shots mimic the unsettling feeling of being pulled forward into danger, while sudden handheld bursts during attacks fracture the visual rhythm and amplify chaos. One particularly memorable sequence follows Judy as she explores the attic. The camera tracks her in near silence, weaving through dusty beams, then shifts suddenly into erratic handheld movements as shadows surge across the space. This change in motion makes the audience feel the transition from calm exploration to terror. Lighting is central to the mood. Much of the film is cloaked in low-key lighting, with shadows filling corners and hallways. Candlelight, moonlight, and flickering lamps create shifting pools of illumination that make viewers constantly question what lurks in the dark. Lorraine's visions are often bathed in cooler blue tones, giving them an ethereal, otherworldly quality, while Ed's more grounded moments are lit with warmer hues that stress his humanity and fragility. During the climax, harsh backlighting through shattered glass and mirror shards produces a fractured visual texture that mirrors the film's themes of brokenness and reflection. These lighting choices are not decorative but narrative, tying mood directly to character states. Color palette plays an equally important role. Muted earth tones dominate the Warrens' home and the Smurl house, grounding the story in realism and evoking the 1980s period setting. However, when supernatural events intensify, the palette shifts. Cool grays, pale blues, and stark whites take over, draining warmth from the frame and visually signaling the encroachment of the otherworldly. The demon's appearances are often accompanied by sudden intrusions of deep blacks contrasted with harsh whites, creating a visual dissonance that unsettles the viewer. Standout shots demonstrate the cinematography's ability to leave lasting impressions. One such moment occurs when Lorraine kneels in front of the mirror, her reflection fracturing into multiple ghostly doubles as the camera slowly pushes in. The symmetry and distortion linger in memory, not just as a scare but as a visual metaphor for her divided psyche. Another striking composition takes place during the exorcism, where the camera rotates slowly upside down as the room erupts with supernatural energy, visually conveying the inversion of reality. These are not merely decorative flourishes but purposeful images designed to communicate story and theme. The cinematography also balances spectacle with intimacy. While large-scale shots of the house engulfed in shadow create grandeur, quiet close-ups keep the narrative personal. For instance, Judy's terrified glance during a vision is shot with extreme tightness, her eye filling the frame, making the audience feel trapped within her fear. This balance ensures the film never loses its human core amidst its supernatural grandeur. In terms of overall style, the cinematography avoids overpolished visuals in favor of textures that feel lived in and eerie. Grainy shadows, soft focus in visions, and deliberate imperfections give the film a tactile quality. This prevents it from feeling like a glossy blockbuster and roots it in the rawness that made the first Conjuring so effective. Ultimately, the cinematography of The Conjuring Last Rites is not just decorative but essential to the storytelling. It guides the viewer's eye, manipulates emotional response, and deepens thematic resonance. Through careful choices in framing, movement, color, and lighting, the film creates images that both terrify and linger. It ensures that long after the credits roll, audiences remember not only what they felt but exactly how they saw it. The editing of The Conjuring Last Rites plays a central role in how the film builds dread, releases tension, and maintains narrative clarity. The film is edited with a deliberate balance of patience and urgency, giving certain sequences room to breathe while others accelerate into chaos. This rhythm across acts is what keeps the audience engaged, though not every choice lands equally well. In the first act, editing is restrained and smooth. Scenes linger longer than typical horror films, allowing atmosphere to sink in. Early domestic moments in the Smurl home are cut with wide establishing shots and long takes, letting silence and stillness build unease. Transitions are intentionally slow, with fades and dissolves suggesting time passing naturally. This gives the sense that the haunting is creeping in gradually, mirroring the family's slow realization of danger. The choice to avoid rapid cutting early on helps the scares feel earned when they do arrive. As the story progresses into the second act, pacing begins to tighten. Montages of the Warrens investigating are introduced, research sequences, photographs, and notes intercut with eerie glimpses of supernatural activity. These montages propel momentum without feeling rushed, giving the audience bursts of energy between slower, dread-filled passages. Cross-cutting becomes a key device here, especially when Judy's visions overlap with her parents' discoveries. By interweaving these threads, the editing heightens suspense and underscores the family's interconnected struggle against the entity. One of the most effective uses of editing comes in the attic sequence. Judy's exploration is presented with elongated takes as she inches through the darkness, each sound amplified by silence. When the presence reveals itself, the rhythm shifts abruptly into rapid-fire cuts, her terrified face, the swinging bulb, the rushing shadows. The contrast between slow build and sudden acceleration maximizes the impact of the scare. This pattern recurs throughout the film, showing how editing manipulates time to control audience emotion. Flashbacks are also integrated into the narrative, primarily through Lorraine's visions. These are cut with a hazy, disjointed rhythm, often using jump cuts and overlapping images. The intention is to create confusion and disorientation, reflecting her experience of glimpsing fragmented pieces of the past. While this is effective in conveying atmosphere, some viewers may find the non-linear editing here slightly disorienting, especially when visions bleed into present action. Still, this technique underlines how the film plays with time rather than sticking to strict linearity. The third act escalates both pacing and cutting style. The exorcism and mirror confrontation sequence is heavily cross-cut between the Warrens, Judy, and the possessed victim. This quick rhythm creates intensity and urgency, keeping viewers on edge. However, the reliance on rapid cutting at times sacrifices clarity. Certain shots flash by so quickly that spatial geography of the room becomes harder to follow, reducing the impact of what should be the most frightening visuals. A steadier rhythm here might have allowed the spectacle to feel more coherent while maintaining tension. Silence is another key editing tool. The film often holds on moments without music, letting the absence of sound stretch time and heighten unease. A perfect example is Lorraine's first extended look into the mirror. The cut holds her reflection for several seconds, longer than feels comfortable, before breaking with a sharp visual jolt. These choices show that the film trusts restraint as much as it relies on jump cuts, allowing the audience to lean forward in anticipation. Emotionally, the editing amplifies certain beats beautifully. When Ed collapses after a particularly intense vision, the cut lingers on Lorraine's reaction rather than rushing away. This editorial choice prioritizes character over spectacle, reminding viewers that the story's core is the Warrens' bond. On the other hand, some of the secondary characters' arcs feel rushed because their scenes are trimmed down to functional beats. This editorial decision keeps the runtime tight, but at the cost of emotional depth for supporting figures. Overall, the editing of The Conjuring Last Rites demonstrates a strong understanding of horror rhythm, when to hold, when to accelerate, and when to overwhelm the audience with sensory chaos. While a few moments of overcutting weaken clarity in the climax, the film largely benefits from its blend of patience and urgency. By alternating silence with sudden bursts, slow burns with rapid fire, the editing ensures the audience is never comfortable, always waiting for the next unsettling shift. This balance of restraint and release is what makes the pacing of the film both gripping and memorable. The music of The Conjuring Last Rites is more than background decoration. It acts as an active force that shapes atmosphere, guides emotional beats, and builds tension. Composed by Joseph Bishara, who has been the sonic architect of much of the Conjuring universe, the score leans heavily into haunting motifs, unsettling sound textures, and strategic silences that magnify the horror. His work is instantly recognizable and once again becomes a character in its own right within the film. One of the most effective elements is the use of recurring motifs tied to characters and supernatural forces. Lorraine Warren is associated with a delicate but eerie string progression, often beginning softly before dissolving into dissonant tones. This cue highlights her gift and her burden, giving the audience a subconscious signal that a vision or revelation is coming. In contrast, the demonic presence is introduced with guttural, low-frequency rumbles paired with distorted choral voices. These sounds create a primal unease, working at a level beyond conscious awareness. The repetition of these cues throughout the film ensures that even before something appears on screen, the audience feels its presence. The soundtrack also demonstrates the power of restraint. Silence is used as effectively as music. Several key scares rely on holding back the score entirely, forcing the viewer to sit in oppressive quiet before a sudden burst of sound tears through the stillness. The mirror scene where Lorraine first notices her reflection moving independently is one of the strongest examples. There is no music, only ambient noise, until the shocking moment lands with a piercing violin screech. This dynamic interplay between silence and sound manipulation keeps the audience uneasy, never able to predict when the next cue will arrive. Bishara's instrumentation choices amplify the supernatural themes. Strings are often played in unconventional ways, scraping, plucking, bending notes, to create unnatural textures. Layered whispers, distorted voices, and church organ tones are integrated into the score, blurring the line between music and sound design. This merging makes the score feel alive, almost as though the house itself is producing its own sounds. The attic sequence, for instance, builds with faint whispers woven into the score, making viewers strain to distinguish between diegetic sound and musical composition. There are also moments where the score manipulates emotional tension rather than just delivering scares. In quieter family scenes, warm piano notes and subdued strings provide contrast, reminding the audience of the Warrens' humanity and their love for Judy. This softer music makes the following bursts of horror more jarring, as the audience is pulled from safety back into fear. The emotional climax, where Lorraine risks herself to confront the entity, is underscored by swelling strings that balance dread with hope, making the resolution feel cathartic. Licensed music is used sparingly but strategically, mainly to ground the story in its 1980s setting. A period-appropriate track plays faintly on the radio during one early domestic scene, lulling viewers into comfort before the supernatural intrudes. This juxtaposition highlights how horror disrupts everyday life, a theme central to the Conjuring series. While these moments are brief, they add authenticity and provide a tonal break from the intensity of the score. Not every choice works perfectly. In certain scenes, the score leans heavily on sudden stings that feel familiar within the franchise, occasionally tipping into predictability. A few jump scares rely more on a loud musical jolt than on visual build-up, which undercuts the subtlety established in earlier sequences. However, these instances are outweighed by the overall creativity of the score, which blends classical horror sensibilities with experimental soundscapes. What makes the music unforgettable are the scenes where sound and image work in perfect harmony. The exorcism sequence is the best example. Dissonant strings, pounding percussion, and layered voices rise and collapse in waves, mirroring the struggle between faith and possession. When the mirror shatters, the score drops into silence for a beat before erupting again, creating one of the most visceral moments in the film. This careful orchestration transforms what could have been a chaotic spectacle into an emotionally resonant climax. Ultimately, the soundtrack and score of The Conjuring Last Rites elevate the film from effective horror to immersive experience. Bishara's motifs attach themselves to characters and themes, silence becomes as frightening as sound, and key cues imprint themselves on memory long after the credits roll. While some familiar stings may feel overused, the overall sonic design is both haunting and essential, ensuring that the film lingers not only in what you see but also in what you hear. The Conjuring Last Rites, like earlier entries in the franchise, is more than just a collection of scares and supernatural confrontations. Beneath its plot of hauntings, possessions, and demonic threats, the film carries a series of recurring themes and deeper messages that anchor the story emotionally and philosophically. Horror here is not only a spectacle to unsettle audiences but also a tool to explore identity, love, faith, sacrifice, and the tension between fear and hope. By paying attention to how the movie uses action, imagery, and character arcs, we can see that its real power lies in the resonance of its ideas beyond the surface. One of the central themes in The Conjuring Last Rites is legacy. Much of the narrative revolves around Ed and Lorraine Warren facing their own limitations while passing responsibility to their daughter Judy. The haunting linked to the cursed mirror is not just another case but a symbol of reflection, forcing characters to literally and metaphorically confront themselves. The mirror embodies memory, inheritance, and identity. Judy's visions are framed as a continuation of her mother's gift, suggesting that gifts and burdens are both passed through generations. This raises questions about whether destiny is chosen or inherited and whether one can escape the shadow of their parents' lives. The theme of legacy is reinforced in imagery, particularly when Judy is shown in frames and compositions parallel to Lorraine's earlier struggles. The film communicates this idea visually without needing dialogue, showing us that the story is about continuity as much as confrontation. Another powerful theme is sacrifice. The Warrens' marriage has always been portrayed as the heart of the series, and here the question becomes whether love can endure when faith is tested to its breaking point. Ed's physical weakness and Lorraine's spiritual burden highlight their vulnerability, yet their willingness to sacrifice for each other and for the families they help defines their strength. The climax, where Lorraine risks losing herself in the mirror realm to save others, underscores the theme that true love is inseparable from sacrifice. Even Judy, still young and learning her own strength, shows small acts of bravery that echo this message. The idea that one must give of themselves to protect others is woven into the structure of the film and reinforced in both small gestures and the larger supernatural showdown. Faith and doubt also emerge as central concerns. The Conjuring films often wrestle with religious and spiritual questions, and Last Rites is no exception. The exorcism scenes are not only spectacles of horror but also visual arguments about the power of belief. Faith here is not blind but tested. Characters waver, hesitate, and question themselves before ultimately finding strength in conviction. The editing emphasizes this theme by cutting between silence and prayer, between chaos and moments of clarity, showing how faith acts as an anchor in disorienting circumstances. The film communicates this more through imagery than dialogue: crosses tilting on walls, hands gripping rosaries, or shadows retreating under light. The question is not simply whether demons can be defeated, but whether belief itself can stand strong when challenged by darkness. A subtler theme is identity and the fear of losing it. The mirror serves as a metaphor for fractured selfhood. When characters see themselves distorted or doubled, the horror comes from the possibility of being replaced, consumed, or erased. Lorraine's visions of herself within the mirror realm highlight the danger of losing control over her identity. Judy's struggle with her inherited gift also plays into this theme. She must decide whether to accept this part of herself or fear it. The demon thrives on fear of the self, using reflection as a weapon. This gives the film a psychological depth beyond its supernatural trappings, reminding audiences that horror often reflects inner battles as much as outer ones. The film also explores the tension between fear and love. Many scenes are staged as contrasts between moments of terror and moments of tenderness. Ed's frailty is often highlighted in sequences where Lorraine's love for him steadies him, creating an emotional core that counters the fear outside their marriage. Judy's bond with her parents, even when strained by secrets and danger, becomes a lifeline. Thematically, the movie argues that love is the antidote to fear, and while evil thrives on division and despair, unity and compassion allow characters to resist and endure. However, the movie is not without thematic contradictions. While it strongly champions love and faith, it sometimes muddles the message by leaning too heavily on spectacle in the finale. The reliance on explosive visual effects overshadows some of the quieter moments where themes of sacrifice and identity are most clearly expressed. This creates mixed signals. On one hand, the film wants to be about intimate human struggles, but on the other it indulges in larger-than-life supernatural battles that dilute that intimacy. Yet for some viewers, this tension itself may be part of the appeal, showing how horror as a genre wrestles between personal meaning and grand spectacle. In the end, The Conjuring Last Rites is about more than exorcisms and haunted mirrors. It is a story about legacy, sacrifice, identity, and the endurance of love in the face of fear. Its most powerful ideas are communicated not in speeches but in images: a trembling hand holding a rosary, a reflection that moves independently, a daughter standing where her mother once stood, or a husband and wife holding each other as shadows close in. These echoes show that beneath the fear lies a meditation on what it means to love, believe, and carry forward a legacy in a world that constantly tries to strip those things away. The Conjuring Last Rites relies on a blend of practical effects and CGI to build its supernatural world, and the balance between the two determines whether the film's scares feel immersive or artificial. For much of the runtime, the effects are restrained, working in service of atmosphere rather than spectacle. However, the finale leans heavily on digital enhancements, creating moments of both technical brilliance and occasional distraction. One of the most effective uses of visual effects is the cursed mirror itself. Practical glasswork and in-camera tricks are combined with digital enhancements to create unsettling distortions and ghostly doubles. Early in the film, Lorraine's reflection moves independently in subtle ways: a shift of the eyes, a delayed motion of the hand. These moments are achieved through careful compositing and blending practical performance with digital manipulation. Because the effects are understated, they feel seamless and chilling rather than flashy. The attic sequence also demonstrates strong integration of VFX and practical design. Shadows swirl unnaturally across the space, created through a mix of lighting tricks and digital overlays. The blend keeps the audience guessing about what is real within the frame. A particularly memorable shot shows Judy surrounded by shifting figures just outside the reach of light, their forms fading in and out of visibility. The choice to keep these manifestations indistinct rather than fully rendered makes them more frightening, showing how restraint can heighten dread. Creature design is where CGI plays a more noticeable role. The demonic entity that emerges from the mirror is built on a digital framework, possibly enhanced with motion capture, layered over practical prosthetics for close-ups. When glimpsed in shadow or partially obscured, the effect is convincing and frightening. However, in the climax when the creature fully manifests during the exorcism, the digital rendering becomes more obvious. Some movements appear slightly too fluid compared to the physical environment, breaking the illusion of weight and presence. While this does not ruin the sequence, it does highlight how digital effects can occasionally feel disconnected when overexposed. The shattering mirror sequence during the finale is a showcase of heavy compositing. Dozens of shards reflect distorted images of characters and demonic forms simultaneously, creating a chaotic visual that underlines the theme of fractured identity. Technically, the layering is impressive, with reflections interacting believably with live-action performances. This is one of the moments where CGI elevates storytelling rather than distracting from it. The audience is not just watching a spectacle but experiencing a metaphor for the characters' psychological struggles. Practical effects remain the foundation of the film's scares. Doors slamming, objects levitating, and environmental distortions often use wirework, rigs, and set design enhanced with subtle digital polish. These grounded effects keep the horror tactile, making it easier for viewers to suspend disbelief. A scene where a rosary burns into Lorraine's palm, for example, combines prosthetic makeup with a light digital glow, creating a seamless effect that feels disturbingly real. Sound design often works hand in hand with visual effects to sell the moment. When CGI shadows sweep across the house, the creaks and whispers layered over them make the digital presence feel physical. This integration prevents the effects from feeling ornamental and anchors them in the film's world. Not every effect works equally well. A few of the possession sequences, particularly when the victim's body contorts unnaturally, rely on CGI enhancements that look slightly exaggerated. While they communicate the supernatural element, the visual smoothness undercuts the raw physicality of practical contortion work seen in earlier Conjuring entries. These moments risk pulling the viewer out of the experience by feeling more like visual tricks than lived terror. Overall, the visual effects and CGI in The Conjuring Last Rites mostly succeed in supporting the story rather than overshadowing it. The best sequences, like the subtle mirror distortions and the fractured reflection climax, use digital tools to enhance atmosphere and theme. The weaker moments appear when the film leans too heavily into spectacle, revealing the limitations of CGI in a franchise built on realism and grounded fear. Still, the visual effects remain a vital part of the film's identity, ensuring that the supernatural feels present, threatening, and thematically resonant without completely sacrificing the tactile authenticity that defines the Conjuring series. The set design and location choices in The Conjuring Last Rites play a critical role in creating the atmosphere that sustains the film's tension. Unlike many horror films that rely solely on dim lighting and sound design, this entry in the Conjuring universe uses production design as a storytelling device. Every room, corridor, and outdoor space feels purposeful, carrying with it layers of history and personality that heighten the authenticity of the narrative. The central location of the film is the haunted house where much of the action unfolds. Production designers approach this setting not as a blank slate for scares but as a lived-in environment, one that tells its own story before the supernatural even enters. The wallpaper is faded and peeling, the furniture is heavy and outdated, and small personal items, family photos, religious icons, and heirlooms, suggest generations of inhabitants. These touches imply history and give the haunting greater weight, as though the spirits are not invading a space but emerging from it. The audience feels they are stepping into a home with secrets rather than a generic horror backdrop. One of the standout elements of the set design is the cursed mirror, which becomes the symbolic and literal focal point of the story. Its frame is elaborately detailed with carvings that suggest both artistry and menace. The glass is slightly tarnished, with subtle imperfections that catch the light in unsettling ways. Positioned in a grand yet decaying room, the mirror dominates the space, reinforcing its role as a gateway to something unnatural. The decision to place it in a neglected attic rather than a central hall amplifies its aura of hidden corruption, making each scene involving the mirror feel claustrophobic and dangerous. The attic itself is a triumph of production design. Low ceilings, exposed beams, and uneven flooring create an oppressive environment. Dust particles float in the dim light, and the clutter of forgotten possessions reinforces the theme of buried secrets. It is a set that feels grounded in reality yet heightened for cinematic effect. Actors navigating the space appear genuinely constrained, their movements dictated by the physicality of the location. This tactile authenticity enhances the believability of supernatural encounters staged there. Beyond the haunted house, the film makes effective use of exterior and secondary locations. The surrounding grounds are overgrown, with broken fences and decaying statues that suggest neglect and abandonment. Wide shots of the landscape emphasize isolation, reminding the audience that the characters are cut off from outside help. These outdoor settings provide visual contrast to the cramped interiors, but they maintain a sense of menace by keeping the environment hostile and unwelcoming. Other key locations include a church and a small-town police station. The church, with its worn pews and dim candlelight, reinforces the theme of faith under siege. Its design is both sacred and unsettling, as shadows dance across religious statues, hinting at corruption within a holy space. The police station, by contrast, is stark and utilitarian, offering a brief reprieve from the Gothic atmosphere but also emphasizing the inadequacy of institutional authority when faced with supernatural evil. These contrasting locations serve as narrative counterpoints, grounding the story in the real world while highlighting the pervasive reach of the haunting. Props and set dressing further enrich the production design. Objects like rosaries, old journals, and religious relics are not mere decoration but storytelling tools. A child's toy left behind in the attic suggests innocence lost, while cracked icons imply the erosion of faith. These details create layers of meaning that reward attentive viewers and give the sets an almost archaeological quality. Each object feels like a fragment of history tied to the haunting. One of the most impressive aspects of the set design is its use of negative space. Hallways are long and narrow, with doors leading into shadowy rooms. The emptiness of these spaces becomes a canvas for fear, as the audience anticipates what might emerge. Production designers understand that what is unseen can be more terrifying than what is revealed, and the sets reflect this philosophy. By manipulating spatial dynamics, the film sustains suspense without relying solely on jump scares. While much of the film is shot on constructed sets, real locations are used strategically to enhance authenticity. Exterior shots of the town, including cobblestone streets and weathered buildings, ground the story in a recognizable world. These real-world textures provide contrast to the heightened interiors, anchoring the supernatural in a tangible environment. The blending of real locations with studio builds ensures that the film's visual world feels cohesive and immersive. Ultimately, the set design and location choices in The Conjuring Last Rites are integral to its success. They do more than provide backdrops for the action. They establish mood, reinforce themes, and help the actors inhabit their roles. Every choice, from the cluttered attic to the decaying church, supports the story's exploration of hidden evil and fractured faith. By investing in detailed atmospheric production design, the film creates a world that feels both real and haunted, ensuring that the terror resonates long after the credits roll. The dialogue and script of The Conjuring Last Rites are crafted with a balance of functional storytelling and thematic resonance, a necessity for a horror film that aims to both terrify and immerse the audience emotionally. The film avoids falling into the trap of relying entirely on exposition-heavy conversations, instead allowing many of its most powerful moments to unfold through implication, silence, and carefully chosen words. The voice of the script remains consistent with the tone of the larger Conjuring universe, serious and grounded, while introducing enough fresh layers to give this installment its own identity. The dialogue works best when it leans into subtext. Early exchanges between Ed and Lorraine Warren carry the weight of years of shared experience. Simple lines like, "We have seen this before, but never like this," tell the audience both about their expertise and their unease without spelling everything out. These subtle pieces of dialogue function as both character work and thematic signals, showing that the Warrens are seasoned but still vulnerable to what lies ahead. The script demonstrates restraint here, trusting viewers to read between the lines. There are several standout moments where dialogue carries emotional impact. Lorraine's quiet confession to Ed about the toll her visions take on her underscores both the fragility of their relationship and her determination to keep fighting. Her words are not overly poetic but grounded in pain and love, making them believable while revealing her internal conflict. In contrast, Ed's reassurances are simple and direct, embodying his role as the emotional anchor. Their conversations are less about advancing plot and more about reinforcing the human heart at the center of the horror, which strengthens audience investment in their survival. The antagonist's presence is also felt strongly through dialogue, but in a restrained fashion. Rather than constant monologues or explanations, the demonic force is represented in fragmented whispers, guttural phrases, and cryptic taunts. This limited but sharp use of language makes the evil feel more mysterious and terrifying. When the entity does speak in a clearer voice, its words drip with mockery and blasphemy, designed to unsettle both the characters and the audience. These moments show how dialogue can be weaponized, turning simple words into instruments of fear. Supporting characters add texture through their dialogue, though not all lines land with the same weight. The local priest delivers lines that reinforce the spiritual stakes, invoking themes of faith and corruption. His dialogue is sometimes direct and formal, occasionally bordering on heavy-handed, but it matches his archetype and grounds the narrative in a larger theological framework. Meanwhile, townsfolk contribute short, fragmented conversations that hint at local legends and shared fears, adding depth without overstaying their welcome. However, a few of these interactions do veer into exposition that feels inserted primarily to fill gaps rather than arise organically from character. Silence is another crucial part of the script. Some of the most memorable sequences in The Conjuring Last Rites involve characters not speaking at all. A tense scene in the attic, for example, relies on the absence of dialogue as Ed and Lorraine communicate through glances and body language while listening for faint supernatural noises. This shows confidence in the script, recognizing that not every beat needs to be verbalized. The restraint gives room for atmosphere and allows viewers to project their own fear into the silence. At times, the script does stumble into predictability. A few lines intended as foreshadowing feel too obvious, telegraphing danger rather than letting it emerge naturally. These moments stand out because the rest of the script generally respects the audience's intelligence. For example, repeated references to the cursed object feel slightly redundant once its significance has been firmly established, suggesting that a tighter rewrite could have trimmed the repetition without losing clarity. Overall, the script maintains a careful balance between advancing the supernatural plot and grounding the story in human emotion. Its best strength lies in its layered dialogue, where characters often say one thing but mean another, or where words carry hidden burdens shaped by past films in the franchise. The writing is strongest when it allows conversations to carry dual meanings, one serving the immediate narrative, the other reinforcing broader themes of faith, love, and resilience. In conclusion, the dialogue and script of The Conjuring Last Rites succeed by focusing on subtlety, restraint, and emotional authenticity. The film is not overloaded with unnecessary chatter. Instead, it strategically uses words as weapons, shields, or windows into character psychology. Occasional lapses into on-the-nose exposition prevent it from achieving perfection, but the overall effect is a script that respects its genre while elevating it. The result is a story where what is said, what is whispered, and what is left unspoken all matter equally in crafting an atmosphere of fear and humanity. The Conjuring Last Rites firmly identifies itself as a supernatural horror film, but like many of its predecessors in the franchise, it blends elements of drama, mystery, and even light action to expand its reach beyond a narrow definition of horror. The question with this installment is whether it honors the expectations of the genre while still offering audiences something fresh and emotionally engaging. The execution here demonstrates both strengths and weaknesses, with moments of innovation alongside the comfort of familiar tropes. At its core, horror fans expect certain beats from a Conjuring film: chilling atmosphere, slow-build tension, jump scares, supernatural imagery, and the moral battle between good and evil. The Last Rites does not shy away from delivering these staples. It uses long stretches of silence interrupted by sudden sharp sounds to keep audiences on edge, leans into unsettling imagery such as flickering lights, moving shadows, and cursed objects, and ensures that the demonic antagonist is terrifying both visually and thematically. These elements satisfy the baseline expectations of genre fans, confirming that this is indeed a continuation of the Conjuring legacy rather than a radical departure. Where the film particularly succeeds is in its integration of emotional drama into the horror framework. The Conjuring series has always centered on Ed and Lorraine Warren not just as paranormal investigators, but as a married couple deeply committed to one another. The Last Rites continues this approach, embedding horror within personal stakes. Scenes of the Warrens discussing the toll of their work, or Lorraine's vulnerability in sharing her visions, ground the supernatural elements in human emotion. This mixture of horror and drama elevates the film beyond simple scares, making the audience care about the people at the center of the haunting. In this respect, the film honors and strengthens the hybrid nature of the franchise, which has always leaned into character-driven storytelling as much as scares. In terms of innovation, The Last Rites experiments with pacing and structure in ways that distinguish it from earlier entries. While most Conjuring films follow a fairly linear escalation of supernatural events, this installment plays more with mystery and delayed revelations. The narrative withholds key information about the cursed mirror until the midpoint, inviting audiences to piece together clues along with the Warrens. This structure borrows from mystery and thriller genres, giving the story a layered feel rather than simply escalating hauntings. It also makes the final act feel more rewarding because the audience has been actively engaged in uncovering the source of evil rather than passively waiting for a climax. However, the film does lean on certain clichés that horror fans will recognize immediately. There are moments of predictable setup where a character walks into a darkened room alone, pauses at a noise, and inevitably encounters a jump scare. While these beats are executed competently, they are familiar enough that seasoned viewers may see them coming. The difference is that The Last Rites often layers these familiar moments with emotional stakes or visual style, making them more effective than they might otherwise be. Instead of being lazy repetition, they are careful nods to genre convention delivered with craft. One of the risks the film takes is in its treatment of faith and religion as core themes. While earlier entries in the series often presented faith as an unshakable shield against evil, The Last Rites complicates this idea by portraying institutions like the church as flawed and vulnerable to corruption. This departure may delight some fans who crave depth and thematic complexity, but could alienate others who prefer the straightforward good versus evil framework. By pushing against the boundaries of what the Conjuring series has established, the film refreshes its genre identity while running the risk of dividing its audience. Comparisons to other films in the genre highlight both strengths and weaknesses. Unlike purely gore-driven horror films, The Last Rites avoids excessive violence, instead favoring psychological and supernatural dread. This choice aligns with what audiences have come to expect from the Conjuring brand and helps maintain its identity as more refined than many of its contemporaries. At the same time, compared to groundbreaking horror that radically reinvents the genre, The Last Rites is more conservative, preferring to evolve rather than revolutionize. It does not dismantle genre expectations but reshapes them within the franchise's established framework. The blend of genres is also important to acknowledge. The inclusion of mystery elements gives the film a detective-like quality, with the Warrens piecing together evidence and lore. The inclusion of light action in the final confrontation, with physical struggle alongside spiritual warfare, provides a climactic energy that appeals to broader audiences. These choices make the film accessible to viewers who may not be die-hard horror fans, broadening its appeal without losing its identity. Ultimately, The Conjuring Last Rites executes its genre with confidence, offering audiences what they expect while delivering enough surprises to keep the formula fresh. It honors classic horror beats with atmosphere, scares, and supernatural antagonism while weaving in strong drama, mystery structure, and thematic risk-taking. Its occasional reliance on clichés is balanced by emotional authenticity and visual sophistication. For fans of horror and the Conjuring universe in particular, the film delivers a satisfying experience that respects tradition while nudging the genre into new territory. The Conjuring Last Rites, while primarily marketed as a supernatural horror film, carries within it layers of social and cultural commentary that enrich the story and make it more than just an exercise in scares. Like previous entries in the franchise, it builds on the struggles of faith, morality, and the eternal battle between good and evil, but this installment digs further into contemporary anxieties. It reflects on institutions, belief systems, and the human condition, often revealing more about the real world than about the fictional hauntings on screen. One of the clearest cultural themes in the film is the treatment of faith and institutional religion. The Conjuring franchise has always been rooted in Catholic imagery, using priests, exorcisms, and religious relics as weapons against supernatural forces. The Last Rites continues this but complicates it by questioning the authority and integrity of religious institutions. A subplot involving a priest who is himself wrestling with corruption and doubt shows how faith can be tainted by human failings. This reflects real-world disillusionment with institutions that are supposed to provide spiritual safety but often reveal hypocrisy and weakness. The message is not that faith itself is broken, but that its protectors are fallible. This commentary resonates with contemporary debates about organized religion, trust, and spiritual authority. The film also addresses the theme of trauma and how communities respond to it. The townspeople depicted in the story are not just bystanders to a haunting but individuals shaped by generational fear. The cursed mirror is not only an object of evil but a metaphor for buried history, sins and violence passed down through time. This connects to the cultural idea that societies often suppress dark chapters of their past rather than confronting them directly. The way characters try to ignore or explain away the supernatural until it can no longer be denied mirrors how communities avoid grappling with uncomfortable truths until they erupt into crisis. The commentary here is subtle but sharp. Denial does not eliminate trauma, it only allows it to fester. Another cultural angle is gender. Lorraine Warren's role in the story highlights the position of women in both spiritual and social battles. Her visions and psychic abilities give her power, yet they also burden her with isolation and vulnerability. The narrative explores how women's intuition and emotional intelligence are often dismissed until proven correct under dire circumstances. At the same time, her strength in facing evil reclaims agency and highlights how women navigate spaces of both belief and fear. This resonates with broader cultural conversations about women's voices, credibility, and the balance between empowerment and exploitation of their gifts. The Conjuring Last Rites also touches on generational conflict, a theme that has cultural weight in today's world. The Warrens represent an older, steadfast belief system rooted in religious conviction, while younger characters question, doubt, or interpret the supernatural through modern frameworks. The tension between traditional faith and modern skepticism reflects a cultural shift in many societies where younger generations are less religiously affiliated but still seek meaning in unexplained phenomena. By showing how these worldviews clash and occasionally converge, the film acknowledges a wider cultural conversation about where belief fits in a secularizing world. Social commentary is also present in how the film deals with evil itself. The antagonist, embodied in the cursed mirror and the demonic presence attached to it, represents more than a supernatural threat. It symbolizes the hidden darkness within human history and collective conscience. This can be read as a metaphor for cultural guilt, societies haunted by their past mistakes, whether violence, corruption, or oppression. The mirror literally reflects characters but also metaphorically forces them to confront aspects of themselves and their communities they would rather avoid. This interpretation broadens the film beyond horror into cultural allegory. Where the film risks oversimplification is in its reliance on the binary of good versus evil. While it complicates institutional faith, it still tends to present evil as an external, supernatural force rather than as something deeply intertwined with human systems of power. For viewers seeking deeper socio-political commentary, this may feel like a missed opportunity. The demonic becomes a scapegoat for corruption or violence, allowing characters and audiences to externalize blame rather than fully confronting the idea that evil often emerges from within society itself. Nevertheless, the film contains timely moments that resonate with audiences today. Its exploration of doubt within institutions reflects ongoing cultural debates about authority, whether religious, political, or social. Its treatment of generational trauma echoes conversations about how historical injustices continue to haunt communities. Its representation of Lorraine as both vulnerable and empowered speaks to contemporary gender discourse. By embedding these themes within a horror narrative, The Conjuring Last Rites ensures that its scares are not only visceral but also reflective of real-world anxieties. The reception of the film's commentary will depend on the audience. Some viewers may appreciate the depth and resonance, finding in its haunted mirror a reflection of societal struggles. Others may find the commentary diluted or overshadowed by genre conventions, preferring a straightforward battle of good versus evil. Yet even in its simplicity, the film opens space for viewers to interpret its subtext in ways meaningful to their own cultural contexts. In conclusion, The Conjuring Last Rites succeeds in offering social and cultural commentary that enriches its horror elements. It tackles themes of institutional trust, generational trauma, gendered power, and collective guilt, using its supernatural narrative as both metaphor and mirror. While it sometimes simplifies complex issues into externalized evil, it also raises questions that resonate beyond the screen. The result is a horror film that not only entertains but also reflects the anxieties and conflicts of the world it comes from. Audience engagement is one of the most important measures of success for a film like The Conjuring Last Rites. The Conjuring franchise has always thrived not only because of its scares but because it knows how to create moments that audiences remember, discuss, and revisit. This installment is no exception. It provides a balance of gasp-inducing jump scares, emotionally resonant character beats, and thematic layers that spark conversation and debate long after the credits roll. The film manages to engage both casual viewers who want a night of thrills and die-hard fans who will comb through every scene for hidden details and deeper meaning. The scenes most likely to make viewers gasp are those that build tension slowly before unleashing a carefully timed scare. One standout moment occurs in the attic with the cursed mirror. For several minutes, silence dominates as Lorraine investigates the space. The camera lingers on the mirror, and just when viewers expect something obvious, the scare arrives in an unexpected way through subtle movement in the reflection. The delayed payoff ensures a genuine gasp rather than a predictable jolt. These scenes are designed to create communal reactions in theaters, where entire audiences jump in unison, which has always been one of the hallmarks of the Conjuring experience. Equally engaging are the emotionally heavy scenes that strike a different chord. One moment where Lorraine confesses to Ed about the toll her visions are taking will likely make some viewers tear up. It is not horror in the traditional sense, but it resonates because it highlights the personal sacrifices made by characters audiences have followed across multiple films. This scene is designed to engage viewers on a deeper level, reinforcing the idea that the Warrens are not simply paranormal investigators but real people navigating love, fear, and responsibility. These moments of humanity provide a balance to the terror, making the scares more impactful because audiences care about the characters. The film also includes moments designed to encourage debate and discussion long after the credits roll. The cursed mirror, central to the story, leaves behind lingering questions about its origins and whether the evil attached to it is truly defeated or merely contained. Fans will speculate about whether the mirror connects to other artifacts in the Warrens' collection, tying this film to the larger Conjuring universe. Such narrative gaps are deliberate, fueling fan theories and ensuring engagement continues online through forums, social media, and discussion groups. Humor is scarce in The Conjuring Last Rites, but there are a few lighter moments designed to relieve tension. A supporting character provides dry observations that momentarily break the atmosphere of dread, earning small laughs from audiences who welcome the relief. These moments are carefully placed so they do not undermine the seriousness of the horror, but they help make the film more accessible to a wide audience. In horror, laughter often heightens the next scare, and the film uses this rhythm effectively. Rewatchability is another key component of audience engagement, and this film is structured with that in mind. Many scenes contain subtle details that viewers may not notice on first viewing. For example, background objects in the mirror sometimes shift slightly, suggesting the presence of something unseen. On repeat viewings, fans will spot these clues earlier, which makes the experience richer. Additionally, certain pieces of dialogue carry double meanings that become clear only after knowing the full story. These touches reward attentive viewers and ensure the film maintains life beyond its initial release. The final act contains signature moments built for repeat viewing and viral sharing. The climactic confrontation with the entity produces several striking images, including Lorraine being pulled into the mirror world while Ed fights to bring her back. These visuals are haunting, symbolic, and memorable enough to become iconic frames within the franchise. They are the type of moments likely to be turned into GIFs, screenshots, and video clips that circulate online, keeping the film in cultural conversation. Horror fans in particular love to dissect climactic battles, and The Conjuring Last Rites provides material that is both emotionally charged and visually spectacular. The film also encourages debate about its ending. Without revealing too much, the resolution leaves enough ambiguity for viewers to argue about whether the evil has been permanently vanquished or if it lingers, waiting for another opportunity. This kind of open-ended conclusion is common in horror but works especially well here because it fits the larger Conjuring mythology. Fans will leave theaters not just scared but curious, eager to discuss and speculate. This keeps engagement alive long after the initial viewing experience. Finally, the combination of scares, emotion, and symbolism ensures that different audience segments find something to connect with. Hardcore horror fans engage with the technical execution of the scares, casual viewers connect with the human drama, and theorists dive into the lore and unanswered questions. By serving multiple levels of audience interest, The Conjuring Last Rites broadens its engagement potential and solidifies its place as a film that sparks conversation rather than fading quickly from memory. In conclusion, The Conjuring Last Rites delivers engagement through carefully crafted scares, emotional intimacy, layered details, and open-ended storytelling. It knows when to shock, when to touch the heart, and when to provoke thought. By doing so, it ensures not only that audiences are gripped during the film but that they continue to discuss, revisit, and share its moments long after leaving the theater. This balance of immediate thrills and lasting resonance is what makes it a strong entry in the franchise and a film that will keep fans engaged for years to come. When comparing The Conjuring Last Rites to similar films in the horror genre and to earlier installments in the franchise, its strengths and weaknesses become more defined. One of the clearest comparisons is, of course, to the earlier Conjuring films. The original The Conjuring set a high standard with its grounded storytelling, restrained use of special effects, and reliance on tension over spectacle. The Conjuring 2 expanded the universe with bigger set pieces and deeper exploration of the Warrens' personal lives. The Conjuring Last Rites, in many ways, aims to combine those strengths by delivering both the intimate character focus of the first film and the expansive supernatural battles of the second. Whether it succeeds depends on which aspects a viewer prioritizes. Some will appreciate the blend of personal stakes and escalating spectacle, while others may feel the film leans too heavily into visual grandeur at the cost of the eerie simplicity that defined the original. When compared to spin-offs within the Conjuring universe, such as Annabelle and The Nun, The Conjuring Last Rites feels more polished and thematically rich. The spin-offs often relied heavily on surface scares and iconic imagery without developing the same level of emotional connection. Last Rites, however, keeps Ed and Lorraine at the center, reminding audiences that the series' strongest asset has always been the Warrens' relationship. This grounding makes it stand out among its sister films, though some viewers might argue that spin-offs like The Nun delivered more consistent scares, even if at the expense of depth. Outside of its own universe, comparisons can be made with other modern supernatural horror films. James Wan's Insidious, for example, provides an interesting benchmark. Like the Conjuring franchise, Insidious balances family drama with paranormal terror, but it leans more into surreal, dreamlike imagery. The Conjuring Last Rites, while echoing some of those stylistic touches in its mirror world sequences, remains rooted in a more traditional Gothic aesthetic. This helps it stay consistent with the established tone of the series, though it might appear less daring when placed beside the stylistic risks taken by Insidious or films like Ari Aster's Hereditary. Hereditary and similar elevated horror films provide another angle of comparison. These films are often praised for their slow burn pacing, thematic weight, and psychological depth. While The Conjuring Last Rites attempts to include social and cultural commentary, it does not pursue it with the same unflinching commitment. Instead, it uses thematic elements as seasoning rather than the main dish. For audiences who value layered symbolism and allegory, Last Rites may feel less impactful than Hereditary or Jordan Peele's Get Out, both of which placed social commentary at the center of their narratives. However, fans of traditional horror might find this balance refreshing, as it allows the film to remain accessible without becoming bogged down in metaphor. Classic horror comparisons are also inevitable. Films like The Exorcist and Poltergeist remain cornerstones of supernatural horror, and the Conjuring series has always drawn inspiration from them. The Conjuring Last Rites continues this lineage with its focus on possession, cursed objects, and the battle between good and evil. Yet, while The Exorcist was groundbreaking in its raw intensity and Poltergeist shocked audiences with its blend of suburban familiarity and supernatural chaos, Last Rites does not achieve the same level of cultural disruption. Instead, it refines existing formulas rather than reinventing them, delivering a film that feels more like an evolution than a revolution. The film can also be compared to more recent haunted house stories like the Haunting of Hill House series on streaming platforms. These stories emphasize atmosphere, family trauma, and lingering dread. Last Rites shares the interest in tying supernatural terror to emotional wounds, especially through Lorraine's visions and her vulnerability, but it places greater emphasis on spectacle and pacing to meet the expectations of a theatrical release. Where Hill House luxuriates in its slow build and layered storytelling, Last Rites moves briskly, aiming for audience engagement through rhythm and momentum rather than extended meditation. Looking specifically at the director's past work within this universe, The Conjuring Last Rites shows both growth and repetition. There is a confidence in handling large-scale sequences, suggesting the director has become more comfortable staging complex supernatural battles. However, some sequences borrow heavily from earlier films in terms of staging and structure. For instance, scenes where characters walk slowly through dimly lit hallways before a sudden apparition feel very familiar. These choices demonstrate both the strength of a trusted formula and the limitation of repeating patterns without substantial innovation. At its best, The Conjuring Last Rites borrows smartly from its predecessors, refining scare techniques and deepening character dynamics. At its weakest, it risks feeling too safe compared to more experimental modern horror. By leaning into the Gothic tradition and delivering strong central performances, it distinguishes itself from lesser spin-offs and formulaic haunted house entries. But when measured against the genre's groundbreaking milestones or its own franchise's high points, it stops just short of matching that level of ambition. Ultimately, The Conjuring Last Rites occupies a middle ground in the broader cinematic conversation. It does not redefine horror in the way classics did, nor does it experiment as boldly as recent elevated horror films. Instead, it reinforces the strengths that made the franchise beloved: emotional resonance, Gothic scares, and the Warrens' humanity, while cautiously exploring new stylistic territory. For some, that consistency will be a virtue. For others, it will feel like a missed opportunity. Symbolism and metaphor play a crucial role in The Conjuring Last Rites, helping the film communicate meaning beyond its surface scares. Much of the film's imagery is carefully designed to suggest deeper truths about faith, fear, love, and the battle between light and darkness. By analyzing these choices, the hidden layers of the story come to life and show how the filmmakers aim to give the narrative more resonance than a typical haunted house tale. One of the most consistent visual symbols in the film is light versus shadow. Throughout the story, rooms are frequently divided by pools of dim candlelight and deep darkness. This contrast is more than just atmospheric, it underscores the constant tension between good and evil. Light often surrounds the Warrens or characters seeking help, while shadow dominates areas tied to demonic activity. The fact that Lorraine frequently steps between light and shadow during her visions reinforces her role as a mediator between worlds. This visual motif reflects the broader thematic struggle, reminding viewers that faith and fear often coexist in the same space. Religious objects, particularly crosses and rosaries, carry layered symbolic meaning. In early scenes, crosses appear upright and strong, signaling protection. As the demonic presence grows, crosses are shown tilting or turning upside down, a clear metaphor for the corruption of faith. This imagery emphasizes how evil does not simply attack from outside but tries to pervert what is sacred. By the climax, when the cross regains its upright form, the symbol reaffirms that true belief can restore balance. This recurring transformation of a simple object into a metaphor for faith under siege adds depth to the supernatural conflict. Mirrors play a prominent symbolic role as well. They appear in several key scenes, often reflecting distorted images of characters or showing visions that are not present in reality. The mirror becomes a metaphor for hidden truths, suppressed fears, or the dual nature of existence. For Lorraine, who relies on her psychic abilities, the mirror is a gateway to seeing what others cannot. But it is also a reminder of the fragility of perception and the danger of mistaking illusion for reality. The use of shattered glass later in the film extends this metaphor, symbolizing the breaking of illusions and the painful clarity that follows. Colors are another subtle yet important form of symbolism. The film frequently uses muted earth tones for safe spaces, while cold blues and sickly greens dominate haunted areas. These colors evoke unease and death, creating a subconscious signal to the viewer that danger is near. Red is reserved for moments of heightened threat or possession, often flashing briefly in lighting or in a character's surroundings. The restrained but deliberate use of red underscores its metaphorical association with blood, violence, and demonic power. Another striking metaphor comes through in the use of doors. Throughout the film, characters encounter doors that creak open on their own, slam shut unexpectedly, or remain locked despite their efforts. These doors symbolize boundaries between worlds, the physical and the spiritual, safety and danger, known and unknown. Lorraine's repeated attempts to open or close these doors become a metaphor for her role in protecting others while risking herself. When a final door bursts open to reveal the climax of the demonic confrontation, it serves as a literal and symbolic threshold into the heart of darkness. The motif of water also surfaces at key points. Scenes involving rain, flooded basements, or dripping ceilings suggest more than natural decay. They symbolize the overwhelming weight of fear and the drowning of rational thought. Water in this context becomes a metaphor for emotions that cannot be contained, spilling into the lives of characters and eroding their sense of control. When water recedes in the aftermath of the climax, it reflects the return of calm and the cleansing power of resolution. The Warrens themselves embody symbolic roles beyond their characters. Ed represents steadfast faith and resilience, often physically confronting evil, while Lorraine symbolizes vision, intuition, and vulnerability. Together, they metaphorically represent the balance between action and insight, strength and sensitivity. Their marriage functions as a larger metaphor for unity in the face of evil, showing that survival requires not only faith in God but faith in each other. Demons and possessions in The Conjuring Last Rites can also be read as metaphors for personal trauma and collective fears. Possession sequences symbolize the loss of agency, where evil manipulates a person's body and mind. On a deeper level, this reflects anxieties about identity, control, and corruption of innocence. When a young character becomes possessed, the metaphor expands to reflect generational vulnerability, suggesting that evil preys most effectively on those not yet fully grounded in their beliefs. The title itself, Last Rites, is loaded with symbolic meaning. It refers to the Catholic sacrament given to those near death, but in the context of the film, it becomes a metaphor for both finality and spiritual preparation. The narrative uses this concept to suggest that characters must confront mortality, fear, and the possibility of eternal damnation before they can find peace. The climax of the story functions almost like a ritual of last rites for the demonic entity itself, symbolizing not only an exorcism but also a final passage into defeat. In the end, the symbolic framework of The Conjuring Last Rites enriches what might otherwise be seen as a straightforward horror tale. Through light and shadow, religious icons, mirrors, colors, doors, and natural elements like water, the film constructs a tapestry of metaphors that deepen the viewing experience. These symbols remind audiences that beneath every supernatural confrontation lies a reflection of human fears, hopes, and struggles. For those who look closely, the film offers more than scares. It offers a meditation on the resilience of faith, the fragility of perception, and the eternal battle between light and darkness. The Conjuring Last Rites exists not only as a standalone horror story but as part of a much larger franchise that has been carefully developed over the past decade. Since the release of the first film in 2013, the Conjuring universe has expanded into multiple spin-offs including Annabelle, The Nun, and The Curse of La Llorona, each tying back in some way to the Warrens' case files. With The Conjuring Last Rites, the filmmakers had the challenge of continuing the central narrative of Ed and Lorraine Warren while also connecting the threads that link the wider series together. In terms of continuity, Last Rites acknowledges and builds on events from the earlier films. It directly follows The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, in which the Warrens confronted a possession case tied to murder and a larger satanic cult. That film left unresolved questions about how far the cult's reach extended and whether the Warrens' health and faith could endure future battles. Last Rites picks up on these threads, presenting what feels like both a continuation and culmination of their journey. For longtime fans, the callbacks are not only rewarding but essential for making sense of the stakes. Easter eggs for the dedicated audience are scattered throughout the film. Objects from earlier entries make subtle appearances, such as the cursed music box from the first Conjuring film, Annabelle's brief presence locked away in the artifact room, and references to the Perron family haunting that began it all. These are not simply nostalgia-driven inclusions but serve as reminders of the Warrens' long history and the accumulated weight of their battles. Viewers familiar with the broader universe will recognize these details as markers of continuity, while new viewers can still appreciate them as unsettling props with implied histories. The timeline placement is also carefully managed. Last Rites situates itself in the late 1980s, moving forward from the early 1970s setting of the first film and the subsequent decade explored in the sequels and spin-offs. This progression allows the series to grow alongside historical changes, both in terms of culture and the Warrens' personal lives. The aging of Ed and Lorraine is addressed directly, with Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga portraying characters who are more fragile physically but still deeply committed to their mission. The fact that this film may mark the final chapter in their cinematic journey adds a layer of poignancy to the narrative. When it comes to historical context, the Conjuring films have always taken inspiration from real cases documented by the Warrens, though they dramatize and fictionalize events for narrative effect. Last Rites is no different. While the specific haunting at the heart of this film is not directly tied to one particular real-life case, elements of it echo the Warrens' documented encounters with cursed objects, demonic infestations, and near-fatal exorcisms. The film uses these fragments of reality to create a sense of authenticity while still shaping a cohesive fictional narrative that fits into the franchise's supernatural framework. The liberties taken with history are evident in how the story escalates. In reality, the Warrens' investigations were often controversial and met with skepticism, with critics accusing them of exaggeration or fabrication. The film, however, frames them unequivocally as heroes combating tangible evil. This choice is consistent with the franchise's approach. It prioritizes dramatic storytelling and emotional resonance over strict historical accuracy. While this may frustrate some who prefer a more factual retelling, it aligns with the expectations of horror audiences who seek atmosphere and catharsis over documentary-style realism. Last Rites also strengthens its ties to other entries in the franchise by reinforcing the presence of recurring antagonistic forces. The demonic entities hinted at in earlier films appear again, suggesting that the Warrens' struggles have always been part of a larger spiritual war. The Nun and Annabelle films are subtly referenced, not only through visual cues but also in dialogue that recalls past confrontations. This interconnectedness is a hallmark of the Conjuring universe and positions Last Rites as both a sequel and a bridge that ties together multiple storylines. Thematically, the film acknowledges the weight of history on the Warrens themselves. Their artifact room, filled with cursed items from past cases, becomes almost a symbolic museum of their battles, a physical representation of their legacy. This space is used more prominently in Last Rites than in prior films, with several scenes drawing attention to how each object holds a story of suffering and survival. It creates a sense of continuity not just for fans but for the characters, reminding them of the cost of their mission and the stakes of their final confrontation. By situating The Conjuring Last Rites within both the franchise and its historical inspiration, the filmmakers balance respect for the series' established mythology with creative liberties that heighten drama. The film advances the larger story by positioning itself as a culmination of the Warrens' cinematic journey, filled with callbacks and thematic closures that reward long-term fans. At the same time, it reflects the franchise's ongoing strategy of blending real-life paranormal lore with fictionalized horror, ensuring that the Conjuring universe remains both grounded in history and free to explore myth. Ultimately, Last Rites feels like both a continuation and a farewell. It honors the history of the series, acknowledges the cultural fascination with the Warrens, and dramatizes their world in ways that keep audiences engaged. Whether seen as a faithful addition to the Conjuring timeline or as a heightened interpretation of paranormal history, the film occupies a meaningful place in the larger cinematic conversation. The Conjuring Last Rites arrives as both a highly anticipated installment in the Conjuring universe and as a major financial project for Warner Bros. And New Line Cinema. The budget of the film is estimated to fall between $40 and $50 million, consistent with previous entries in the franchise. This figure positions it as a mid-tier studio horror film, larger in scale and polish than independent productions, but still economical compared to blockbuster action films that often exceed $150 million. The question then becomes how well the film translates that budget onto the screen and whether the box office performance justifies the investment. On screen, the film looks more expensive than its cost might suggest. The production values are strong, with carefully crafted set designs, period costumes, and polished cinematography that rivals much higher budget productions. The use of practical effects alongside digital enhancements gives the film a grounded authenticity while keeping costs under control. By relying on atmosphere, sound design, and practical scares rather than endless digital spectacle, the filmmakers managed to maximize tension without inflating costs. This efficiency has always been one of the Conjuring franchise's financial strengths, and Last Rites continues the tradition. Marketing also plays a critical role in the film's financial performance. The Conjuring name itself is a brand, carrying with it a built-in fanbase that has supported every installment since 2013. The promotional campaign leaned heavily on this legacy, highlighting the film as the final chapter in the Warren saga. This strategy taps into the audience's emotional investment in Ed and Lorraine, creating a sense of closure that drives both longtime fans and casual viewers to theaters. Trailers emphasize continuity, callbacks, and high-stakes battles with evil, all of which contribute to strong opening weekend attendance. Opening weekend numbers are expected to be robust, given the franchise's track record. Previous Conjuring films have opened in the $30 to $40 million range domestically, often exceeding $100 million in total U.S. box office and achieving even stronger returns internationally. Last Rites benefits from the same global appeal. Horror as a genre has consistently performed well overseas, and the Conjuring series in particular has found strong markets in Latin America, Asia, and Europe. This global reach ensures that the film's box office potential extends far beyond domestic numbers. Beyond box office, other indicators of financial success come into play. Streaming rights, premium video on demand, and eventual home release sales will contribute significantly to the film's profitability. In recent years, Warner Bros. Has leveraged HBO Max, now rebranded under new platforms, to give its films a second life beyond theaters. A horror franchise with a loyal fanbase ensures strong streaming numbers, which provide recurring value long after the theatrical window closes. Additionally, the Conjuring universe has consistently spawned merchandise, books, and theme park attractions, all of which feed into the financial ecosystem of the series. One of the strengths of The Conjuring Last Rites is that it does not appear to rely on excessive spending to create spectacle. Unlike superhero films or fantasy blockbusters, which often need to justify huge budgets through massive global box office hauls, horror films tend to operate with leaner budgets that allow for profitability even at moderate returns. A film made for under $50 million that grosses over $200 million worldwide is considered a major success, and that trajectory is highly likely for Last Rites given the franchise's history. Still, box office outcomes are never guaranteed. The release strategy, particularly the timing, has an impact on performance. By placing the film in a summer or fall release window, the studio ensures it benefits from either peak movie-going season or the natural demand for horror around Halloween. Competition from other blockbusters can affect its numbers, but horror films often carve out their own space since audiences see them as a unique experience not easily replaced by action or comedy releases. Critical reception also plays a role in sustaining box office momentum. While horror films can succeed even with mixed reviews, positive word of mouth is vital for longevity. If audiences leave theaters recommending the film as a satisfying conclusion to the Warren saga, Last Rites could enjoy repeat business and a strong second or third week at the box office. Negative buzz, however, could lead to a sharp drop-off after the opening weekend. The Conjuring franchise has generally enjoyed solid critical and audience reception, giving Last Rites an advantage in this area. In the broader context of the franchise, The Conjuring Last Rites is not just a single financial project but part of a larger portfolio. Each film adds value to the brand, increasing interest in spin-offs and reinforcing Warner Bros.' reputation for delivering quality horror at relatively low cost. The financial model here is built on efficiency. Modest budgets, high production value, strong global appeal, and reliable returns. Last Rites, marketed as both a climax and continuation of the universe, fits squarely within this model. In conclusion, The Conjuring Last Rites demonstrates how a film can punch above its weight financially. With a mid-range budget that looks far richer on screen, a marketing campaign that leans into emotional closure, and a release strategy that capitalizes on both domestic and global audiences, it is positioned for success. Even if it does not reach the highest grossing heights of earlier entries, its ability to deliver profitability without excessive risk makes it a strong example of how horror franchises thrive in the modern industry. When it comes to experiencing The Conjuring Last Rites, the choice of where and how you watch it will directly affect how much impact the film has. Like most horror films in the Conjuring franchise, it was designed to be a communal and atmospheric experience, with the big screen amplifying its scares. At the same time, the growing importance of streaming platforms and digital rentals makes it more accessible to viewers who prefer the comfort of their own home. Each option comes with its strengths and weaknesses, and deciding the right one depends on what kind of experience you want from the film. First and foremost, the theatrical release is the definitive way to watch The Conjuring Last Rites. The movie has been crafted with cinematography, sound design, and pacing that rely heavily on scale. Horror thrives on immersion, and theaters provide that through massive screens, surround sound, and a crowd of fellow moviegoers reacting in unison. Jump scares, eerie silences, and sudden bursts of sound are far more effective when you are surrounded by booming speakers and an audience gasping or holding its breath together. Watching in a theater also gives you the chance to see the intricate set designs and lighting choices in their full detail, which can be lost when viewed on smaller screens. If you enjoy being fully enveloped in the story and feeding off the collective energy of other viewers, theaters are the best choice. For those who prefer a more intimate and controlled experience, streaming platforms offer the next best option. The Conjuring Last Rites is expected to land on major streaming services after its theatrical window, most likely through Warner Bros.' own distribution channels. Streaming allows you to watch at your own pace, pausing when needed or revisiting scenes to catch subtle details. To maximize this experience, a darkroom, high-quality television, and good sound system or headphones are essential. Horror films lose much of their tension if watched casually in daylight or with background distractions. With streaming, you can create your own mini-theater environment and heighten the scares without leaving your home. Digital rentals and purchases also provide flexible viewing options. Services that offer the film for rent shortly after its theatrical run make it convenient for those who want to see it without committing to a subscription. The benefit here is accessibility. Anyone with an internet connection and a screen can rent or buy it, making it possible to enjoy the film without waiting for it to appear on a particular platform. This option is ideal for viewers who may not have a nearby theater or who want to watch the movie at their own pace without being tied to a monthly streaming service. For physical media enthusiasts, a Blu-ray or DVD release will eventually follow. This format offers the highest picture quality and often includes special features such as behind-the-scenes documentaries, director's commentary, and deleted scenes. Fans of the franchise who collect films will find this option rewarding because it provides both ownership and exclusive content that streaming does not always include. Physical media also ensures access even if films are cycled off digital platforms over time. The context of how you watch also changes the impact of the film. If you are aiming for the most frightening and memorable experience, the big screen with surround sound cannot be beaten. Horror thrives in the theater environment because distractions are minimized, and you are locked into the story. At home, the intensity of the film depends largely on how prepared you are to recreate that sense of focus. Turning off the lights, silencing phones, and watching with headphones can dramatically improve immersion. On the other hand, if you prefer a lighter, more casual experience, streaming or renting allows you to dip in and out without the commitment of a theatrical showing. Rewatchability is another factor to consider when deciding how to watch. The Conjuring films often reward multiple viewings because of their subtle foreshadowing, visual motifs, and hidden background scares that are easy to miss the first time. Streaming or owning a copy makes it easier to revisit those moments, pause on significant frames, and catch the smaller details that enrich the story. The theatrical experience may deliver the strongest first impression, but digital or physical formats allow for deeper analysis and long-term enjoyment. Ultimately, The Conjuring Last Rites is flexible in how it can be enjoyed. For the full-scale experience where every scare hits with maximum intensity, theaters are the clear recommendation. For convenience and comfort, streaming platforms provide an accessible and immersive alternative when combined with the right setup. Rentals and purchases make it easy to watch at home on demand, while physical media offers the most comprehensive long-term value with bonus features and collection appeal. No matter which option you choose, the key is to align your viewing environment with the kind of experience you want. If you are seeking to be fully immersed and caught off guard, prioritize the theater. If you want to study the film, appreciate its craftsmanship, or revisit its themes, home options are more practical. Either way, The Conjuring Last Rites delivers an atmosphere of dread and suspense that carries across formats, proving that a well-made horror film can adapt to multiple viewing contexts while still leaving its audience unsettled long after the credits roll. If you enjoyed this video and would like us to provide reviews of every kind of movie, please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel. Have a great day, and we'll see you in the next video.
Goodbye.